think a common fear among a lot of people is probably being afraid of the ocean. It can look crisp and beautiful in vacation photos, but the few times I have personally been out far enough to see no land has been very strange. I even had that strange feeling from the comfort of a boat in calm waters. Think about a 360-degree circumference for miles or seamlessly endless ocean. What truly cements that fear for me is a time where I was on vacation and went out to a pier very late at night. The same calm ocean, it was now pitch black. Just hearing the ocean roar and churn made me think, imagine sailing on that same boat right now. I turned around and in that moment went back to where I was staying, probably out of fear. But I think those memories were a large reason why I was intrigued by this game, where you stay on a lonely island deep in the middle of the ocean. That alone is a terrifying thought, sure, but I'm sure there were some other reasons as well. Maybe it was the PS1 aesthetic that made the game seem so eerie. Maybe the trailer with the creepy music and unsettling droning sounds reminiscent of stuff like The Shining. Maybe another valid reason. But to be honest, it was because this shit was like only $5. So sit back, relax, maybe get a little terrified. It's time for a $5 review. The game starts us off in a lighthouse right in the middle of the night. So far so good. You can look around, but there isn't a whole lot other than climbing up the tower, so we naturally go into the next room. Once we enter that room, we see a lantern, some oil, and boom bang! As you ascend the stairs, a loud bang comes to the locked door that we previously walked by, letting us know we aren't the only ones here. We go up the stairs, pour the oil in the lighthouse, and next thing you know, we start out the next day. We get a narration letting us know the previous worker has gone missing, and we now play as a new worker arriving to take care of the island. We are then left on this foggy, dull island, all by ourselves to take care of this lighthouse. The only thing close to company is the seagulls that chirp in the wind. Every day the island changes and things begin to get more creepy. I could talk more, but this is one of those games the less you know, the better. So I'll leave you with that.
Many people thought they heard.
I'll be quick on gameplay, because there isn't a whole lot to talk about. The game is more focused on building atmosphere and scaring you, instead of presenting you with complicated mechanics or in-depth systems. It's pretty simple, you solve some puzzles, and by puzzles I mean complete daily tasks, clean the windows, repair the roof, dig up holes, and turn on the lighthouse every fucking day. Nothing super difficult or riveting, but it's more for building immersion and to keep the story moving, which is actually quite enjoyable. It's more like a walking sim than a survival horror game, which I think is a better fit based on this game's runtime. A little issue that can pop up though is how this game needs to be triggered in a certain sequence of events, instead of the player tackling the problem in any order they wish. For example, at one point in the game, the roof breaks. So I went out to the shed, grabbed my tools, grabbed a ladder, and then I had to walk around the entire house trying to figure out where to place this ladder. The thing was, I couldn't place it until I did a certain event. Once I did that event, I could then go back to the house and place the ladder. It's just odd because nothing compelled me to do this certain event until I had nothing else left to try, and that kind of breaks the immersion of the game. Makes you realize that you have to kind of like move the game forward yourself instead of letting the game naturally take you where it wants you to go. Overall though, it's not a super big issue, it can just be annoying sometimes. If you couldn't tell already, this game is supposed to be reminiscent of the PS1 horror games, for example, Silent Hill, Resident Evil, stuff like that. This game does a very good job of building atmosphere, and the PS1 look really gives it this jagged, uncomfortable feel. Some of the visual settings though can be a bit annoying, and I feel like they hampered the game, especially when it begins to rain on day 3. Luckily they can be turned on and off at your leisure. Here's some comparisons of the different graphic settings. I personally think it looks a lot better without the hard pixels and dithering. It makes everything seem so much more clear without it, so you can enjoy the blockiness of the PS1 style graphics. I don't know, there's a beauty to it. It's very odd and foreign and kind of like a relic of the past. It's kind of like finding an old video game you didn't know existed in an attic. The graphic presentation was actually one of the first things that really caught my eye, and also is one of the things that I really do enjoy about this game, other than the very excellent sound design. It It makes you feel like something's watching you, waiting for the moment you let your guard down so it can spring out and attack. It's very good, and it builds a very eerie atmosphere. It's really neat, and I definitely think it's the strongest part of the game, as the sound design will really immerse and set the tone for the game, especially when these certain set pieces come into play.
Tend to do it, but maybe it's something that people in the area, whatever.
I think one of the best set pieces that helps set the tone is right in the beginning of the game. So once we get to the island, we go up the stairs and find the oil can laying on the ground from the previous person who we were playing as before. Even though it's something little, it still sets the tone as we have an idea what kind of happened to the previous keeper, but not exactly what happened, keeping us wondering what else lurks on this island. I think my favorite though, and the one that really caught me off guard, was on a day where you had to dig up piles of dirt to find your key. As you go around the island, you find dead seagulls buried in some of the piles. Eventually you find the key, and the rest of the day plays out with some other events that I'll talk about later. The next day you hear this. The chirps of the seagulls are gone, and the island is a lot more quiet. Even the droning ocean isn't as loud as it normally is. It's subtle, but once I noticed the absence of sound, it definitely gave me a chill down my spine.
I watch TV every night for 2 hours straight live. It is just me.
Alright, now we're going to be talking about the big horror section of the game, and by that I mean the ones featuring this big beautiful moth boy.
You so fucking precious when you smile.
I want to take a minute and talk about his design first, mostly because I think it's unique and very cool. It's hard to make out his features, which is in line with the indescribable horrors of H.P. Lovecraft, for example stuff like Call of Cthulhu and Mountains of Madness. The difference being though is this creature is actually based off of a moth instead of the usual sea life that you see in games like Darkest Dungeon, octopus faces and stuff like that. And once you see the creature, it's even more terrifying up close. It's very indescribable and it's very hard to actually make out his details, making it even more terrifying. At one point, the monster will start to chase you down and try and kill you. The visuals for this are very interesting, but they are kind of hard to work with. You can still control your character, but you're looking through the eyes of the creature, so it's very hard to control, and it makes it super hard to see where you're going until he's right up on you. I died several times actually running up to the house, instead of not realizing I could just make a straight beeline to the shed.
Let me in! Let me in!
After that terrifying sequence, we are then taken to this very dark maze. The only thing we have is our lantern. This was a section I mentioned earlier in the video. Cool in concept, but not executed very well. You basically have to traverse this giant maze while Mothman here runs you down. You can take 2 hits, which is nice compared to earlier since you only died in 1, and also in your first person, so running away isn't such a hassle. The sound design here is actually great as well. It helps clue you in on where the monster is by hearing its moans, and also hearing its steps through the sludge-like sewer. The big issue though is getting out of the maze itself. The first section isn't too bad since there's a giant hole so you can easily figure out where to go. The second section though is a huge pain in the ass. There isn't exactly a clear-cut clue of where to go until you can spot these flesh claws, but even then they don't really help out a lot. And the downside is, since everything looks the same, you can get turned around very easily. Also, for some reason the monster can see you through these pillars, which I hope isn't intentional, so it's very hard to sneak by him. And since he's pretty close to the exit, you kinda just have to get lucky. Overall though, cool in concept, just lacking in execution, and sadly I do think this is probably the weakest part of the game, since every other part was so much more immersive and enjoyable. This was just a big headache overall. That's as far as I will go story-wise, because I do think the ending is very cool, and has a very fun endgame set piece which reveals a lot about the lore of the island and the monster itself.
That there was a major problem.
I wasn't really sure how to rate this game, or other $5 games in the future, but I decided just to ask a simple question instead of giving a game journalist style rating. And that question is this game worth playing? And the answer to that question would be
Yes!
Fun atmosphere, great sound design, a wonderful use of PS1 style graphics. The only gripe I can say about this game is that one of the 2 endings really cuts out a big and interesting section of the game. To be honest, if you took it out of the game completely, it wouldn't affect anything at all. My advice would be not to look for these medallions until your second playthrough. The last thing I would like to say though is I really did enjoy this game and I definitely recommend it. I do hope the boys and girls over at Sowoke Studios do another PS1 style horror game since this one was so good, and I can't wait to see what they are working on in the future.